First of all, thank you. I ride my bike here, so.
You're crazy.
You mentioned that there was no brushback when the story came out. I'm just wondering if the two of you are really careful about not speeding, and have you found that you got any extra tickets since that came out?
I think my last ticket actually was when I was about 22 years old, and I'm 60 now, so I've done pretty good.
I was extremely careful. I had a rule where I would never go more than 5 miles over the speed limit, and I still pretty much stick to that. But I was never pulled over, so I don't feel like they. I had a house in Coconut Grove at the time, and there was we picked on Miami police more than anybody. It just worked out that way because they were the worst ones. And for a while there was a marked car that would just kind of drive up and down my little tiny road pretty slowly. So I don't know if that was harassment or not, but that's the closest I got.
But it's a good question. If I may add something, it's fair to be concerned about that. And I remember the Friday before it published, so it published on a Sunday, and by Friday afternoon, Friday evening, it's all wrapped up. I pulled the team together, not only John and Sally, but photographers who had worked on it and some key editors. We got together in Willie's office, and I said, you know, if you got a taillight out, fix it. If your plate is expired by a couple of weeks, get it fixed. You don't want to put yourself in that position come Sunday when this is published. Turns out to have been unnecessary, but obviously it was a concern.
We also had wondered if the cops had pulled our records on us, and because they pulled records on that, a lot of pulled records on the female trooper who pulled the guy over, and she sued a bunch of agencies and got little bits of money. She didn't sue them for a lot, but it turned out that they hadn't pulled records on us.
Question: data. There's a fire hose of data out there. Big data is the subject of the day. Whether it's the speeding or whether it's climate change in today's New York Times story with all the information we have on ice sheets. I'd like to invite the three of you to talk about the future of journalism and big data and how it works together for investigative purposes, since a lot of people here are students and might be headed in that direction themselves.
Well, I'll answer that. It's hard to tell where we're going because believe me, it's a permanent part of journalism now. Absolutely. And a little side, in 1996, when I started doing this work with my computer, my own computer, an editor pulled me aside for my evaluation and said, "John, I got to tell you, there's no future for computers in journalism." But a few years ago, after we won the Pulitzer, we were at a seminar with Columbia, and they showed Snowfall, which was the New York Times piece. And if you haven't seen it, it's about an avalanche that killed people. And they put together this amazing video. And we would have never dreamed in 1996 that we would be using data that way. It was amazing, a computer-generated video.
What did we call it when it first came into prominence in the 80s? Computer-assisted reporting?
Right.
I think now you call it reporting.
Yeah.
It's so ingrained in the culture of journalism that I don't think it stands out anymore as unusual. It's just part and parcel. You got to do it. You got to know numbers, and you got to know what they mean, not just. And that's why John is an expert.
But are you going in any? Yeah, are you seeing the signs pointing in any new directions, possibilities for further digging into data?
Yeah, I mean, basically, as computer power increases and you get access to more data, of course, computer power and hard drive size was a real problem long ago, and not that long ago, 15 years ago. So we can handle more data, we can process more data. Data visuals are the big thing right now. That you'll see, wonderful graphics that tell a story in a graphic. That's very popular with journalism students. I went for my first conference in '94 for people like me, and out of a couple hundred people, there were probably 4 women. And if you go to that same conference today, there were 1,000, I think, at the last one, and probably most of them women, and they're very interested in data visualization. So that's where we're headed right now.
very informative talk. How many people out of the entire force were people that did speed? I'm going to ask a few questions together. Is it still being monitored? Do you think that the psychological testing for the job should be changed, or was it changed? And in which case, I will say the job of journalist is very important. You not only bring issues to us, but it results in the change for better, I hope. And thank you in advance.
I think, wasn't it 1 in 5?
Yeah.
I think we ended up with records for about 3,500 individual police cars. And we found those speeds of 90 or above in 1 out of 5. So, that's pretty frequent. And the monitoring part of your question, some of the police agencies, I will say that the police chiefs did take this very seriously when we presented it to them. And I think in some cases they were kind of grateful. Miami police, the administration was, because they knew they had a problem, and finally they had sort of irrefutable proof and something to discipline the cops and use to, as a teaching tool. But a couple of the agencies, one of them started collecting SunPass records and doing exactly what we had done to keep track of how fast their guys were going. Another one, they had a feature within their cars that they hadn't turned on, but they did turn it on, and it's connected to the GPS. So anytime they go over the speed limit, this annoying computer voice says, "You are speeding." So, I don't know if they're still doing that. That was back as of 2012. It'd be interesting to go back now and see if they are still doing it. And they were definitely talking about, culture change, that they needed to address this in training, back in basic training, do not just a regular safe driving course, but a real emphasis on, the dangers of speeding and how you just can't do it.
The work you did was just amazing. Knowing a little bit about this work, I think I was at that same conference, John, was quite amazing. But I have one question about it. Sally, you mentioned that a couple of uniformed cops came in to find out how you did it. But then you said, and they took samples. So did you share your data with law enforcement? Yeah,
those are two separate things. So yes, we did. We, John and I, before publication, we printed out. We decided not to give them an electronic spreadsheet, but we made printouts of all of the different cars that we had and all the speeds that we had calculated. So we arranged meetings we tried to meet with the chiefs of all a dozen or so agencies. And we took those spreadsheets and we gave them to them because, for two reasons. One, we wanted to be absolutely sure that they had a chance to look at this, and if anybody was going to say, your numbers are, you're off the wall, this isn't right, we wanted to know that ahead of time. So that's why we gave it to them. We wanted them to have everything we had to vet, make sure that nobody was going to dispute it. So we did give it to them. And then the cops that came to the newsroom, this was after the stories ran, and that was the point where they were doing their own internal investigations to try to, they didn't want to just rely on basically the spreadsheets the newspaper gave them. They wanted to do their own calculations to be sure that what we had was right. And so we just showed them, here's how we did it.
I felt sorry for the guys who talked to me. I don't remember what police department it was. They sent two guys, just regular street cops, and said, tell us how you did this. I said, well, you did that, blah, 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 blah. And man, I don't understand a word you just said.
So we're gonna take two more questions because we started a bit late. We want to have time to get to our panel from the Miami Herald, but I will remind everybody that there's a reception in Panther Square after this, where you can of course continue the discussion with the team.
Just logistically speaking, how does Pulitzer receive the stories or find out about, the different methods and stuff that you work with and make their decision?
I didn't quite hear the question.
It's how does the Pulitzer, how do they, learn about the stories and make their decisions? So each year there's a period, an entry period, and every newspaper can submit their best work, and you pick the category you think that it fits the best in, and you submit. You pick the work that you want to enter. So we had a number of stories we had to kind of select from which ones we thought would make a good impression, and then you write a letter that sort of summarizes kind of like what we've been talking about, all the behind the scenes work that went into it, the results that you got, and then all of those entries they call them Pulitzer juries. And so they'll meet over a period of several days, and they break into categories. And it's very well-respected journalists from around the country, editors, some reporters, and they then take all of the nominations for that category, read them all, and whittle it down to 3 recommendations. And those 3 recommendations go to the Pulitzer board, and they select the winner and the finalists.
It's newspapers, wire services, I believe pure play websites can now enter, and very recently magazines were allowed to enter as well, but all U.S. It's not international.
Good question. What was the demographic profile of the speeding cops? Were they mainly men? Were there certain age groups? Were there certain ethnic groups? What was the demographic profile of the speeding cops?
That's interesting because we never did get all of the names that were assigned to all those 3,500 transponders. We really only got names for the ones that ended up getting disciplined by their own agencies. And the few that we singled out. And I have to say, so we don't have a big sample that I could tell you, that kind of breakdown, but I don't remember a single woman. Do you?
No.
It was all men. And it kind of ranged from, it wasn't just, rookies, it was some younger guys, but it was a lot of older, people with a lot of experience who certainly should have known better. And it's almost all of it was going back and forth to work. So, and keep in mind this is toll roads only, so who knows, what they were doing on I-95. So this was just the people who were taking the turnpike, essentially, and some of the toll roads down here, and the ones that had the take-home cars. But mostly men. All men, I guess.
Good. So let's cut it off. If there are any other questions, I'm fairly certain John and Sally, as well as our other participants, will be hanging out at the reception afterwards, so you can ask then. But for now, let's cut it off, and let's give our friends at the Miami Herald a chance to replace us up here.